Operator Syndrome, episode 44. We're back. We're going to talk about schools more or training, sort of not non-standard training, unique opportunities you get. We're going to pick back up with that. But first, Steve has another clarification he wants to make.
I'm always making mistakes, so I feel really bad about it. Yeah, it was a minor clarification, and I'm sure this has kept many people up at night. Um, I said that the SEALs. I was talking about sniper school, and I had mentioned that the SEALs have their own sniper course now. That's a full blown curriculum that's standardized for all the SEAL teams. And I said it was in Crane, Indiana. It's actually Camp Atterbury, Indiana, which is a joint base.
Mm,
The reason I was just a complete brain fart. I went to Crane, Indiana as a sniper with another sniper because there's a naval weapons testing center there. And we were testing some new high speed scopes that they wanted real shooters to get behind. And that was kind of fun. But it was just a brain fart. It wasn't Crane, Indiana's where the sniper school is. It is Camp Atterbury, or at least it was
mm-hmm.
when I visited it about 5 or 6 years ago. So just wanted to make that clear.
That's good. Unnecessary, but we appreciate that. Um, we'll do again, and as always, the common disclaimer. You're basically watching or listening to a history, an oral history. So
Yeah,
take it in that vein. We're not telling you how things work now. We're trying our best to remember how they worked back then.
sure.
Um, okay. So schools, yeah. Last time we talked about the knife fighting school, the combative school. You talked about a jungle warfare school in Sear, and
Hmm.
Sear's interesting actually. Um, so we'll just keep going with that. Some of the more interesting opportunities, again, and this is, and I think this is pretty common to all special operations units, which is, they like to send. There is pretty much universally an individual training time and an opportunity to send folks out to get individual skills, individual unique capabilities that they can pull together to round out the team. And they look like many different things. Um, Again, in my time, some of the menu of options that were available would include, um, you had different shooting schools put on by different instructors, some big names.
Hmm.
Larry Vickers was a guy who was coming around, and a bunch of others. So shooting school, driving schools. So we'd send guys to off-road driving schools. We'd send guys to like racing-esque type schools. Um, so they'd go and they drive high performance. I think that's what they call it, like high performance driving.
Yeah,
So they'd go and do that. I don't know if they did any of like the cop stuff, like
yeah,
the pit maneuvers or any of that type of stuff, but it may have been. But I know the off road driving was the one because all the country boys and third bat, they wanted to. They were looking for any opportunity to like plus up their skills with that regard.
yeah,
And then just like a lot of random stuff. Surreptitious entry was one, which is, um, uh, you know,
yeah,
uh, breaking into stuff. That's an interesting one. Hot wiring things,
yeah.
um, and all kinds of things. So, and then I mentioned it before, but especially in the Army, you have the opportunity to go a lot of like Army schools, and there's some pretty cool ones out there.
For sure.
There's Mountain Warfare School up in Vermont, and I think they have or had like two versions of that course. There's like a summer version, like a winter version. The
Mm,
winter version one always sounded cool to me because you do like the ice climbing with like
yeah.
the what is it grip
Crampons,
crampons, yeah,
yeah,
crampons and like the ice picks. So you do that kind of stuff. Um, and then
yeah.
you have like all kinds of things you could do in the army. I, one of the things I ended up going to a lot was striker oriented courses. So the striker, for those who don't know, it's an armored vehicle. Um, it's pretty commonly utilized, in that period, 2000, we'll say 2000 to 2000, whatever. I think they're still around. but they were the big green armored personnel carrier looking things with the remote weapon systems on top, and they had different versions. But
No,
we
were they armor? Sorry,
Go ahead.
armored personnel carriers, or they weren't Bradleys? They were like,
They weren't Bradleys. So the Bradleys were tracked
right.
vehicles, and then they had the big cannon on top. I don't know what the caliber was. 30. I don't think it was 40, but it had like the auto cannon on top, and it had the tow missiles on top.
Mhm.
So those, although in the beginning of the Iraq War, Rangers would hitch a ride with mechanized units sometimes on
Mhm.
those. The Strikers were it's wheeled armored personnel carrier or infantry fighting vehicle. The nomenclature is
Yeah.
lost to me, but it had 8 wheels, four on each side. It had a ramp. It could carry. You had a driver, a gunner, a TC,
Mm.
and then so that was the crew. And then you could pack a good number of guys in the back. It had bench seats,
Mhm.
and the ramp would go down. So, but relatively early on in the war, the Rangers decided that we wanted to use those to get around. Um, and That's kind of what Rangers do. We adapt to the needs of the battle, right? So, in the Civil War, Ranger units were cavalry units. Um, in Vietnam, they turned into small LRP long range patrol units, right? So we kind of morph into whatever the battle requires of us, and in Iraq, especially we decided that okay, well, we're going to use these strikers are around, so we're going to use these strikers. Normally, in conventional units, you the unit picks a lane, so
Right.
you're paratroopers or you're mechanized or you're striker, which was kind of like considered medium, and
Mhm.
we just kind of did whatever the mission dictated. All that to say is that I ended up going to a number of striker oriented courses and getting pretty smart on strikers.
Hmm.
I even went to like the the manufacturer's course. So I guess the strikers were a General Dynamics product. So I'd even gone to General Dynamics in Washington to one
Mhm.
of their courses there and worked with the actual company and learning how to operate a striker, which is not something that, again, just like combatives, wasn't necessarily my thing. But I went to that. Um, you know, Big, heavy army machinery wasn't something I had envisioned
Right.
doing. Doing learning a lot about armored vehicles wasn't something I envisioned doing when I said, hey, I'm going to be a ranger.
Right.
So went to that, learn how to drive them, operate them, learn what the tolerances were, learned how to work the weapon systems, you know, basic stuff. Learn how to change a tire on one of those things, some basic maintenance, all that kind of stuff. So it was pretty interesting. And later on, I'd go to they created an abbreviated striker leaders course for us. I ended up going to that. So spent a lot of time learning about armored vehicles. Um, Again, not something you would imagine you would do. Um, how about you? You got anything like that?
Yeah, well, I never went to how to operate a vehicle school in the broad category,
Hmm.
but we did have guys that went to one of them went to a Secret Service evasive driving school
Nice.
taught by the Secret Service, like how to really serious business, get away from things and do high speed drive. I mean, they did a course on a racetrack, a full blown racetrack, and they had these
Hmm.
tricked out cars that they were really souped up. I think they were 5.0 Mustangs, but they were turbocharged and they had these enhanced suspension systems. Because I talked to one guy that had just gotten back and he said it was the coolest thing ever. Um, and then the high performance school that you talked about, I think it's the same school. We sent guys to that one and it was similar. How to do really tricky stuff like James Bond driving,
Yeah.
stuff like that. But I never went to those schools. I'll tell you one school that I went to. I alluded to it, but I didn't go into any much detail. Is I went to two winter warfare schools, both in Alaska. It would be analogous to the mountain in the winter up in Vermont. Yeah, we used crampons. We lived in snow caves. I mean, it was so cold at night. We were up at 9,000 feet one night, north of north of Anchorage, nearer to Fairbanks, Alaska, and it was 60 below out without wind chill. And it was the wind was blowing. It was so cold we could not even use tents, expeditionary level tents, because of the frigidness of it. So the warmest place was in a snow cave that we dug in the side of a huge drift, like a little igloo, and burned candles to keep it up to about 30 degrees, which felt pretty toasty when there's
Yeah.
60 below out. And we had great gear. We had thousands of dollars worth of gear. um, we had an incident where a guy four guys almost died. We put four guys in a snow cave. We made them big enough to where now there wasn't a whole lot of room. We were like sardines in there, but we had ground pads and really high speed bags, and we were toasty. And you would put your packs in the crawl space to get in, to keep the wind out. So your packs would be kind of blocking the entrance.
Hmm.
But you had burning a candle and breathing, what would that be? Carbon dioxide.
Right.
You've got to keep a hole. And so we would use our ski poles to make a hole. But you had to clear it because it would ice over and snow over. If it's snowing and even blow over, you'd get drifts. So you had to have a guy on watch at all times clearing the hole to keep fresh air coming in. Well, we were getting up and getting suited up. I was not in this particular snow cave. I was in a different one, and we were emerging from, and then we were wearing all white. That's your camouflage up
Right.
there. It's just these white suits. You look like a big stormtrooper. And so we were coming out, getting set up, getting our packs on, getting ready to hump. And I just want to say one thing: I hated it. I hated it, and I loved it. Learning how to use ice axes and crampons and anchors that go into ice, and snow anchors that lock down. I mean, it is cool, but it is so freaking cold. You're just miserable the whole time. And there's two things happen. You're either, walking through snow, humping's bad enough. And to have the kind of gear it takes to survive in that kind of temperature and that kind of weather, our packs were 100 pounds minimum. And that's not weapons, because we're patrolling at the same time with
Yeah.
weapons and gear that you're trying to. I mean, it's so freaking cold. You have to delube the weapon, right? Take all the lubrication off and use graphite lubricant,
Really.
because because
Yeah.
oil will freeze at that temperature and it will jam, and you can't even shoot. And then you've got issues where we tried to engage. I mean, we were doing target engagements in training, but we would try to engage, and we'd still have them lock up even with the graphite, because when they heated up, condensation would occur, and
Yeah.
then if you had a lull, that stuff would freeze right up. So there were just so many ridiculous things that can happen in the cold, in addition to just trying to stay alive and have enough calories to burn. It was sheer it was sheer misery a lot of the time. And when you're, the worst thing to do is called breaking trail, because you're wearing snowshoes. I mean, legit snowshoes, and the snow is so thick and powdery. You take one step and you sink down about a foot, another step and you sink down about a foot. So when the guy, and you rotate guys in the patrol, when one guy's broken trail for like a click, then he falls back, or a half a click even, depending on how steep and how deep, and then falls back in the back, because in the back you're just do, it's all packed down, and you're just
Yeah.
walking where everybody's packed it down.
Right.
But the first guy, and even the second guy, it's like, it's misery. It's like humping to the max.
Hmm.
But and then the other thing is, when you stop, and if you're planning or you're setting up or you're forming a perimeter for a while, instantly you start to freeze.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when you're walking, you're burning up. So it's either you're just dying because you've got all this gear on, and there's it's really hard to regulate what's the proper, because the moment you stop, and sometimes you just have to be completely covered. It's so cold, it would be instant frostbite if that wind hits you. So it's goggles, it's like full-blown ski gear. So it's a mixed thing. It's kind of cool, but boy, I was ready to get back to San Diego after that.
I
After
believe
that,
that.
but back to the snow cave issue, and I'll kick it back to Patrick. So we had so these guys. One guy went to sleep on watch, and by God's grace, somebody woke up. It had iced over, and the guy I remembered it was Dave, and he said, "Man," he said, I couldn't believe it. I woke up and I was just like, he said, I felt like I was on drugs. He goes, I was about. He's like, I just crawled because I was so sick feeling. He goes, I just crawled. I didn't have any energy, and I got the one of the packs pushed out, and the air just went. And he was like, I was like, he said, I immediately started throwing up and got out of there, and all the guys started waking up and coming to, and it was like they were probably minutes from being dead. And so that was scary.
That's pretty wild. I mean, the dude who fell asleep, it could have
Uh-huh.
been because
Yeah,
obviously there's some not paying attention, but it could have been
right.
like, okay, you're tired, you're smoked, plus that thing's
Mhm.
damming over, and then that contributes. So,
That's right.
I mean, it's
That's right.
one thing to just straight up fall asleep, and then that's a common military thing. You're just a turd when that happens.
Yep.
Although it
But
strikes most of us at some point or another,
yeah,
unfortunately. But that there's a contributing factor there too, right? It's like,
yeah,
not a lot of oxygen plus you're tired and cold.
right. And those things could ice over pretty quick, depending on what was going on outside. So it could have been a combination of, yeah, everybody's exhausted, but he's also building up carbon dioxide already. So yeah.
Yeah, I never did any kind of none. I was gonna say significant, but I never did any kind of serious cold weather training. Definitely nothing Arctic like, which it sounds like. I mean, that's what you were if you're at the stage where you're covering all of your skin. I mean, I think that's probably Arctic training, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I never did anything like that, but I was thinking before you mentioned it how when it was cold plenty of times, how much I hated that transition from when,
Oh,
you're working and you're smoked and you're sweaty and then you stop moving. That's
mhm.
one of the things I hate the most. I can't imagine what that's like when you're, snowshoeing and then you stop, you halt, and then you
Yeah.
gotta and then you're dealing with that.
It might be a blessing in disguise you didn't go out to any of the, or not even in disguise, just a blessing, period. It's,
That's not really something that I'm very interested in. Like, I think about sometimes people will be like, some like people talk about challenges that are out there. I am not a guy who's interested in climbing any mountains.
yeah, yeah,
Going to
yeah,
Mount Everest. Someone were like, "Hey, I'll pay to send you to Everest. I'll pay. I'll give you a stipend." It's just something I'm not interested in. I'm not
yeah,
interested in any of that. I'm not interested in being that
right.
high in snow. Like, it's just not
And
doesn't
that
appeal to me.
cold.
Yeah, and that cold. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. But the first one, I was really jazzed. I was totally stoked to go.
Yeah.
And then the second time it came around, I was like, I just dreaded every second of it. And I was like, psych myself up.
Was this was all that did that have anything to do with the regional alignment of the teams back then? Is that why we've talked about this before, but I forget. But is that why
Yeah.
you were going to so much of that?
Yeah. It was somewhat regionally aligned. Yeah. Because we were, yeah. Yeah. On the West Coast, and now I think SDV teams were an exception, the sealed delivery vehicles, the mini subs. I think those guys didn't go. I don't know. Don't quote me on that, but I remember one group or two didn't go. But yeah, we went. Almost all the West Coast guys went because being in the Southeast Asian region, um, uh, Korea and North Korean aggression was on our radar, and there's some serious snow mountains there. So that was one of the justifications on the I remember on the East Coast, this is so long ago, so just bear that in mind.
Mhm.
Remember on the East Coast, I can't remember, I think it was Team Two went to Norway for winter warfare training, because they were stationed in areas of Europe where there were mountains and Alps and stuff like that. Team Four, I think at that time, didn't tend to go. Now, there may have been exceptions because they were focused on South America and drug interdiction and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So it was somewhat regional, but but a lot of guys went. So,
And, the winter warfare training and the Arctic training, I see, in the last 10 years, we'll say, seeing an
mhm.
I would call it an explosion of that. Like,
Yeah,
if you look at the media, public affairs stuff coming out of the military, if you look at special operations especially, I'm constantly seeing, folks jumping into doing the cold water immersion training and,
yeah,
got the gear on and they're humping in the snow and all this and that's probably because of that are focused towards the great power competition, I think they call it,
yeah.
right? So
Uh,
Russia and China having,
yeah.
many areas
Oh,
where it's very cold. So
I don't even want to think about it. There's a lesson for political movers and shakers out there. Never, Napoleon and Hitler both got in trouble trying to go to Moscow in the wind, and they got their ears pinned back and came back with their tails between their legs. So it is so freaking cold. Number one, I would not want to fight in the cold. Number one, and number two would be the really hot desert if you had to, because those are two really potentially miserable. But I'll tell you one last thing they did. This was the second. I don't know when they started this. His second trip up there to Winter Warfare School. This was in Kodiak Island, Alaska. And the first thing we had to do, the cadre made us do, is get in our UDT shorts and drive on a bus to a pier side and jump in the water. This was our initiation to jump in the water, basically naked. I mean, we had our UDT shorts on, and for 10 minutes sit there and tread water in that stuff. And I want to tell you, you talk there were chunks of ice floating in the water. The water didn't freeze because water freezes below 32 degrees when it's got salt in it,
yeah,
right? Yeah, so the water was literally colder than an ice cube. All right.
yeah,
And I'm it didn't even it wasn't even like a cold feeling, it was like burning when we first entered. And then it took about a minute and it was just like I remember guys had frost on their eyebrows. I mean, literally frost. I mean, you can't make it up. So, I mean, we were like, when we got back on the bus, they couldn't keep us in longer than 10 minutes or we'd be borderline. I mean, we were already, just shivering uncontrollably and having trouble walking. And we were no strangers to cold water. I
sure,
remember from our
sure.
training, but we got back on that bus and we were like, what was the point of that? And, a lot of initiations, there is no point. It's just to make you miserable. And but they justify. I remember one of the instructors said, "We wanted you to do that so that you would see just how cold it really is. Because if you're on a long transit in like a Zodiac raiding craft, which is we had to do some of that in winter warfare, going across the ocean in that weather, um, you have to wear a dry suit. It's called. It's not even a wetsuit. It's a suit that has a seal on your neck, and there no water gets in, and you wear like polypropylene thermal below it, because the wetsuit you couldn't, it wouldn't even help you in that kind of cold. But he said we want to make sure you wear your dry suits when you're on those transits, and we wanted to show you, like, as if as if we wouldn't wear our dry suit for some reason because we didn't understand that the water was really freaking cold. And I remember one of the funnier guys in the platoons, he's like, after that, the instructor got off the bus and he's like, well, why don't we just shoot each other in the leg just to show us the importance of wearing body armor? Like, what the hell? But
Yeah, that's funny. That's funny.
yeah.
That's hilarious. I hear about, yeah, that's funny. That's hilarious. I hear about, again, I never went, but for the cold water immersion, I I feel like I have heard a justification being, well, yeah, okay, you can see what it feels like, right? But then, and knowing is half the battle. But then on top of it, I think it was like how to warm yourself after cold
Yeah.
water immersion. I think that's like the justification I hear. But again, I don't know.
Yeah,
That's
there's some of that.
more
Yeah.
schools. What's another school? Oh, I wanted to mention, so again, small thing. These are just random things you get sent to. I went to a mine detector course. I did that, so I actually learned how to operate, the wand like
Mhm.
the mind sweeping wand,
Looks
and
like
that
a
was
big metal
interesting.
detector.
Yeah,
Also,
the metal, yeah, yeah, it's like it is, yeah, it's a metal detector. Um, that was interesting. It was like a 3-day course. Um, the really interesting thing about it was is I was on my way out when I when they sent me to that course. So I think that the guys were on block leave before going on a deployment, and like in very common Army thinking, they were
mhm,
like, "Well, we wanna send people to this court. We wanna send bodies to this." So, I was gonna be on, the rear detachment because 'cause I'm not going, I'm getting out of the Army at that point, and they sent me and, like, a couple other guys who are on rear D too to the mine to the minesweeper course. So, there's a little bit of context for it, but I was like, again, it's the Army.
yeah,
That is
yeah,
so Army, it's unbelievable. So I go to this minesweeper course, and it was kind of fun. It was cold out, but the interesting thing is even in training, because eventually what you're working yourself up to is they establish a lane, like a lane of dirt, and you gotta get from one end to the other end, and you need to not kill yourself, not notionally kill yourself
right.
by missing things. And I just thought it was interesting 'cause even in training, I'm about to get out of the Army, but it was pretty nerve-wracking
Oh, yeah.
because you don't wanna miss anything. So,
Oh,
like, you're, like, probing everything and you're marking everything, and, in a given lane, the funny thing is in a given lane, it probably had only, like, a handful, we'll say 4 actual mines, but because you're so nervous about missing something, you'll mark out, like, 100 hits of
uh-huh.
things, it'll be, like, bottle caps, and you're marking
Yeah,
everything just 'cause
right.
you're so nervous, and that's kinda like the takeaway from the end. They're like, "Alright, well, there were only 4 things. It's that one, and that one, and the rest of that's just garbage. That's just noise." Um,
Yeah,
but it gave me an appreciation for, and we would never, in my time, we would never operate one of those things. That's why we
right.
had EOD. That's why
Yeah,
we
yeah,
had EOD. That's why we had the dogs who could sniff out some stuff. It would never be us who would actually do it. But it gave me an appreciation at
oh,
the end on my way out for what those guys do.
yeah,
Because I can imagine having that burden on you, but
yeah.
then also having the assault force behind you, like, "Come on, dude, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go," right? Like, pushing
Oh,
you forward,
man.
and then you're sandwiched in between, potentially mines in front of you.
I can't imagine really much more pressure than that,
Yeah.
in almost anything. I mean, maybe it's out there, but yeah, it's that is something I never cared about doing. I liked using explosives under controlled offensive ways because it was controlled and we were trained. But IEDs and mines and stuff like that just scared the crap out of me because they're, I just never had any interest in it at all. But
Mhm.
ku- kudos and thanks to the men and women who do that because it's man, it's just scary. Was there a way to fail the course? I mean, if you missed so many mines, did you?
Well, yeah, of the 4, we'll say, that were actually, like dummy
How many
mines,
mines? Yeah.
yeah, if you miss those, then if you missed a single one, then yeah, that was a failure, and that
Okay.
amped up the pressure too. And of
Right.
course, like, Rangers are gonna do Ranger things, and so it's a competitive thing as well, right? It's like you don't wanna everyone wants
Yeah.
to be the best at it,
Yeah.
whatever that thing
Of
is,
course. Of
you know?
course.
So
You don't want to be. Uh-oh. I missed a mine. Great. Great.
yeah, and that's even in training, that's not something you are gonna live down.
Yeah.
Something especially something like that. Um, uh, one of the things we were gonna talk about, so those are the interesting ones, but we were gonna talk about some of the
Mm.
boring slash, stupid things that you are subjected to as well. Um, did you have one that was top of mind for?
Yeah. It was, I guess it was boring. And I didn't know how boring it was going to be till I got there. I think there were 4 or 5 of us from my 3rd platoon who were sent to this school, and it was a Marine school at Camp Pendleton, which is based north between. San Diego and LA in California on the coast. And it's called Naval Gunfire School. It was call for fire. It was learning how to call in naval gunfire.
Mm,
I think it was just called Naval Gunfire Support or something like that.
that has a
Anyway,
pretty cool name.
it sounds kind of cool until you start realizing it. I would be surprised if they even did it anymore. It goes back to the old World War II where they have big battleships. And, you know, what's hilarious is that, and this makes me feel so old, that between the time I served and now, and when I got out, they decommissioned all the battleships. They don't have battleships anymore. The
Right.
big old things with those humongous things that shoot Volkswagens through the air. I
Yeah.
mean, the huge. So, I mean, it's all, and I don't even think they have destroyers anymore. I was talking to a naval captain that lives locally here, and he said, "No, no, we don't have those anymore." Well, man, so much has changed. I don't even know what the heck I'm talking about. But
Hmm.
this was to call in. It would be like if Marines were landing,
Hmm.
and you're going to call in big fires coming in off these warships that are over the horizon, some of them, and I started to see real quick. It was old grid coordinates and maps. It wasn't GPS. It wasn't laser guided munitions. It wasn't like the stuff you would be more practically using today. It was old school. Here we are. Here's the enemy, and let her rip. And these were such enormous types of rounds, ordnance that were coming in that it was just really scary to think about being, I mean, people make mistakes. Somebody doesn't hear one number of one good coordinates and that could be it. And yeah, so it was just scary for one. And number two, we were thinking, and because it was Mike was with us, Mike Bailey, the senior chief at the time. I think he just made senior chief. And I was like, have you ever used this in all of your career as a SEAL? He goes, never. He's kind of cynical. I'm like, could you ever see using this? He goes, Lord, no. So if we want like support on a SEAL mission, now Marines, I mean, perhaps Marines would need it if a big group were taking a huge area and there are enemy forces. Yeah, I could see that. We've done it before in past wars, I think mostly
Hmm.
World War II. But not as a SEAL mission. I mean, if we're so much smaller and more surgical that, and even Rangers would be the same way. You want close air support, which are platforms we've talked about that can come in and put down really accurate danger close fire, but not a battleship shooting over the horizon with these.
Was there a live fire component to that, or was it just all theoretical?
There was supposed to be a live fire component to it, but it got canceled because of all things. I remember the gunnery sergeant came walking in one day and goes, "Well, live fire's canceled. You can go home early from this course. We're going to give you your certificate because you did all the paperwork." And we're like, now that's really scary because we haven't actually even been able to see how this works, and now we're going home. What had happened was they had an environmental group in California had found a sanctuary for an endangered bird called a gnatcatcher, and they said they're endangered. They're shutting this whole range down until they can figure out a habitat for these birds, which is cool. But
Yeah.
it was like, yeah. So yes and no, we didn't get to do it, but I was kind of looking forward to that because I thought it would be super controlled, which it better have been. But anyhow,
Yeah. I mean, I could see the actual live fire perhaps um, salvaging,
mhm.
even if it was like, well, we're never going to use this, but
Yeah,
hey, it'd be cool to try it out, see what it's like, especially if it was going to be a battleship. But
right.
yeah, that's pretty. Yeah, I could see that. That's still cooler than the shitty schools that we were subjected to. So I mentioned to you before this. I was handpicked to go to UPL school. So I think it was called Unit Prevention Leader, but essentially I was the guy who administered the drug screens, the
This
periodic drug
test.
screens. Yeah, I guess that meant I was trustworthy. Is the way I should have looked at it. They're like, yeah, he's not doing anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's clearly
Yeah.
not doing anything. So that was interesting. There are benefits to being the guy who runs the test. Is that you don't have to be a watcher. You don't have
Uh,
to you know
yeah.
those are always interesting. So I got sent to that. I got sent to we talked about the bus driver. I didn't do bus driver, but that was a common school that people would get sent to. Ammo handlers course. Again, for us, big
Yeah.
army, they put a lot of requirements down, and then it's a check for us. It's a check the box thing. So they sent me to an ammo handlers course that I didn't, and I barely remember that. I think it was an afternoon. I just remember some civilian guy talking about how to package up dunnage,
Mhm.
yelling at us about how Rangers don't put our dunnage the right way. He's like some civilian, like ex, sergeant major who was yelling at us about it. And I got a card at the end. And like I was telling you, I just lost that card immediately. I'm like, I'm not doing anything with this. Well,
Yeah.
the other thing is we had ammo guys. So we had in our eco, which I don't know what they do now, which was our support company, we would have ammo guys whose whole job was that
Right.
ammo stuff.
Oh yeah.
Maybe that was an attempt. I think it was a check the box thing, but maybe it was even an attempt to try to push that back to the line companies.
Hmm.
But I was like, we have ammo guys. I'm not doing this. So
Yeah. Yeah.
but man, those guys, which is slightly off topic, but the ammo guys were that was a bad deal because you'd go through the ranger train, you get selected to come to the regiment. You could be there would be our MOS, there would be infantry MOS guys, and it would just be the luck of the draw. They'd assign people to companies, and then just
Wow.
you'd be unlucky, and then they
Oh,
might say, "Hey, you're going to eco, and then you're going to be an ammo guy." And then you're an ammo. That's your job. Your job is the logistics of the ammo that we need for ranges and stuff.
rather
Um,
than being fighting like
yes,
what you want to do.
exactly. They
Well,
would be they would be fully qualified infantrymen whose every expectation was to join a line company, to be an assaulter, to do whatever, but they got stuck in the support
oh,
company handling ammo.
that blows.
Yeah.
Well, did they ever have the chance to come back
It,
to a
it's
combat unit?
my understanding, like what they would tell those guys is, hey, you're going to do a stint here, and then you're going to do this for a few months or whatever, and then we're going to rotate you out with some other poor sap who takes your place. But I mean, I got the sense that that's just a tough spot to be in because you know, if you're thinking you're going to do one thing and then you end up an ammo handler and then you lose motivation and then you start to get into trouble, all those kind of things, it was not good. I think ultimately they were looking to rotate folks out, but it was not a position you wanted to be in. So,
I see why you lost your card for more than one reason.
well, there was at that point I was a team leader. I had my tab. I had already done so. They were never going to have at most they were going to have me maybe package things up at the range, but it wasn't that
Right.
much of a threat. But if you were a new guy and got sent to ammo, god
Oh,
bless god bless whoever that is.
it's
I
a
see
death.
I see we're out of time here. um, that's it for schools. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next one.
Peace.